In the sprawling landscapes of rural Montana, where majestic pine forests meet the untamed wilderness, lived Brittany Miller, a devoted wildlife biologist. From her earliest years, Brittany harbored a deep affection for all creatures great and small, never quite fitting the mold of someone who would own a traditional pet like a dog. She possessed an unwavering belief that her extensive expertise with wild animals would seamlessly position her at the heart of their unconventional new family. However, fate had a humorous twist in store. When her husband Bill, a man who had never entertained the thought of owning bobcats, surprised her with a pair as a Christmas gift, Brittany couldn't shake the playful feeling of being the odd one out in her own home. Frank and Cole, the two magnificent bobcats, seemed to shower Bill with an abundance of affection, a stark contrast to Brittany's efforts of feeding, treating, grooming, and maintaining their spacious enclosure. A burning question lingered in Brittany's mind. How did this man, with absolutely no prior experience with wild animals, become the undisputed favorite of these captivating creatures, leaving the seasoned expert feeling utterly perplexed? This is a heartwarming tale of unforeseen connections, the peculiar paths love takes, and the extraordinary ways in which the family you never anticipated needing finds you in the most surprising of circumstances. Before we delve into this remarkable story, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more captivating narratives. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. Brittany Miller stood at her kitchen counter, the rhythmic thwack of her knife against the cutting board, a steady beat in the otherwise quiet house. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air as she meticulously sliced carrots. Her gaze drifted towards the backyard, their expansive Montana properties stretching towards the shadowy embrace of a pine forest. The idyllic backdrop she had always envisioned for her life. A life intertwined with wildlife, though the current reality was a far cry from her initial imaginings. Within the custom-built enclosure that commanded a significant portion of their yard, Frank, the younger of their two bobcats, paced with restless energy. His tufted ears twitched, perpetually alert, and his spotted coat gleamed under the afternoon sun. It seemed this spirited feline possessed an inexhaustible wellspring of energy. In contrast, Cole, the elder statesman of the duo, exuded an air of regal indifference as he lounged on a high wooden platform, his golden eyes half closed, observing his brother's antics with detached amusement. The sudden sound of the front door opening shattered the peaceful tableau, causing both bobcats to snap to rigid attention. "Honey, I'm home." Bill's deep voice resonated through the house. A soft smile touched Brittany's lips as she initiated a mental countdown. 3, 2, 1. Precisely on cue, Frank unleashed an excited yowl that echoed through the house, while Cole gracefully rose and stretched languidly. In an instant, both bobcats were transformed and their movements infused with an undeniable animation sparked by the arrival of their favorite human. "There they are. How are my boys doing today?" Bill's voice grew louder as he approached the sliding glass door that provided a view into the enclosure. Brittany gently placed her knife on the counter, wiped her hands on a nearby towel, and leaned against the doorframe, a mixture of amusement and playful exasperation swirling within her. "You know, I've been home with them all day." She began, her tone laced with mock offense. "They didn't make a peep when I went out to meticulously clean their space, but the moment they hear your truck rumble down the driveway." Bill turned to her, his grin as familiar and heart-fluttering as it had been 12 years ago on their wedding day. At 42, her husband possessed a rugged handsomeness that seemed to deepen with each passing year. Salt and pepper hair framing a kind face etched with laugh lines around warm eyes, and an impressive beard that spoke of his days spent maintaining trails in Glacier National Park in his forest ranger uniform, now dusted with the day's adventures. "What can I say?" he quipped, waggling his eyebrows playfully. It's my animal magnetism. Oh, please, Brittany retorted, crossing her arms, a smile betraying her feigned annoyance. You never even wanted pets growing up. That was before I met these guys, Bill countered, stepping outside to greet the Bobcats with genuine enthusiasm. Brittany followed, shaking her head in disbelief at the peculiar dynamic that unfolded daily between her husband and their unconventional companions. Just 3 years prior, if someone had dared to suggest that Bill, practical, steady Bill, who had initially resisted the idea of even a common house cat, would become the undisputed favorite human of 2 rescued Bobcats, she would have erupted in laughter. The genesis of this unlikely tale began on a snowy December morning just days before Christmas. Brittany's life had been an immersive experience with animals. Her childhood summers were spent volunteering at wildlife rehabilitation centers. And as an adult, she channeled that deep-seated passion into a fulfilling career as a wildlife biologist specializing in North American carnivores. Yet despite her professional immersion in the wild animal kingdom, she had never owned conventional pets. I don't understand how someone who loves animals as much as you do has never had a dog. Bill had mused one evening as they watched a nature documentary showcasing the majestic grace of big cats. My parents were allergic to pet dander. Brittany explained, a hint of wistfulness in her voice. And then I was always traveling for school and work. It wouldn't have been fair to have a pet I couldn't properly care for. She sighed softly, her gaze fixed on the Bobcats flickering across the screen. These adaptable predators have always been my favorite native species, a perfect blend of house cat charm and untamed dignity. Bill had listened attentively, peppering her with questions about their habits and habitats. Little did she know, a plan was quietly taking root in his mind. A week later, Bill's call pierced the midday calm, his voice vibrating with an unusual excitement. Britt, I need you to keep an open mind about something. That's never a good start to a conversation, she replied wearily, a premonition of the unexpected settling upon her. There's a wildlife sanctuary about 2 hours from here. They have 2 Bobcats that need a new home. Brothers, a bonded pair. They can't be released into the wild. Brittany's heart skipped a beat. Bill, what are you saying? I'm here now looking at them. They were confiscated from an illegal exotic pet operation. The owner tried to raise them as pets without proper knowledge or facilities. They're too habituated to humans to be released, but the sanctuary is over capacity and looking for experienced wildlife handlers with proper facilities to adopt them. Brittany sank into a chair, her mind racing. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? Merry early Christmas? His voice was tentative, filled with a hopeful anticipation. I know it's unorthodox, but you have all the qualifications. We have the land, and these guys need someone who understands them. She was momentarily speechless, a whirlwind of professional concern and personal longing colliding within her. Bill, this isn't like adopting a puppy. Bobcats require specialized care, proper enclosures, dietary management. I know. That's why I came to check things out first. The sanctuary has a thorough application process. They've already conditionally approved us based on your credentials. You applied without telling me. Just preliminary paperwork. Nothing's decided. But Britt, you should see them. The younger one has been watching me like he's trying to figure me out. The older one is more reserved. But there's something about them. I think they need us. In that instant, Brittany knew something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. Bill, who had spent his formative years in suburban Chicago, his closest encounter with wildlife likely being a pigeon in the park, was standing in a wildlife sanctuary, advocating for the adoption of 2 wild felines. "You're serious about this?" she whispered, incredulity lacing her tone. "Dead serious, but only if you want this too." A laugh escaped her lips, a sound somewhere between joyful and utterly bewildered. "Of course I want this, but I never thought you would." "Well," he replied, his voice softening, "sometimes you make compromises for the people you love, and sometimes those compromises turn out not to be compromises at all." 3 whirlwind weeks followed a flurry of permit applications, frantic enclosure construction, and intensive educational sessions at the wildlife sanctuary. Finally, they welcomed Frank and Cole home. The bobcats arrived in large transport crates, their fear and disorientation palpable. Brittany had meticulously prepared everything. A spacious outdoor enclosure seamlessly connected to a climate-controlled indoor area. An array of enrichment items designed to stimulate their wild instincts, a carefully curated diet, mimicking their natural prey, and the contact information for a specialized wildlife veterinarian. Everything strictly by the book. "Remember," she instructed Bill nervously as they stood poised to open the crates. "No sudden movements, no loud noises. They'll need time to adjust. It might take weeks for them to feel comfortable around us." Bill nodded solemnly, maintaining a respectful distance, as Brittany, with practiced ease, manipulated the crate doors. Cole, the older bobcat at 4 years, emerged first. Cautious, dignified, his tawny coat adorned with subtle spots, his face framed by magnificent facial ruffs. He surveyed his new territory with quiet intensity before retreating to a sheltered corner, his golden eyes observing their every move. Frank, barely past kittenhood at 2 years old, burst forth next a whirlwind of energy and curiosity, despite his initial apprehension. Smaller than his brother, but more boldly marked with prominent spots and expressive tufted ears that swiveled at every unfamiliar sound. That first night's sleep eluded the human occupants of the house. Both Brittany and Bill found themselves periodically checking the security cameras trained on the enclosure. The bobcats remained at opposite ends, Frank tentatively exploring his new surroundings, while Cole maintained a vigilant watch. "They'll warm up eventually," Brittany reassured Bill, attempting to mask her own underlying anxiety. "These transitions are always difficult." Bill nodded gently, squeezing her hand. "They have the best possible caretaker. If anyone can make them feel at home, it's you." For the first month, Brittany was the primary caregiver, meticulously preparing their meals, diligently cleaning their enclosure, carefully documenting their behaviors, and gradually habituating them to her presence. Bill maintained a respectful distance, assisting with the upkeep of the enclosure, but deferring entirely to her expertise. Then, the subtle transformation began. Cole, the more reserved of the two, started approaching the fence. When Bill was nearby, his intense golden eyes following his every movement. "I think he's curious about what you're doing," Brittany commented one weekend as Bill reinforced a section of the enclosure. "Or plotting my demise?" Bill joked, though he glanced at the bobcat with a newfound interest. Frank's curiosity manifested more directly. One afternoon, while Bill sat quietly reading near the enclosure, the younger bobcat approached, pacing back and forth along the fence line, before settling directly across from him, mirroring his relaxed posture. "I think you've made a friend." Brittany whispered, a sense of bewildered amazement washing over her. Bill looked up from his book, his gaze meeting Frank's unblinking stare. "Is that right, buddy? Are we friends now?" Frank responded with a dramatic yawn, revealing an impressive array of teeth before flopping onto his side in what seemed like deliberate nonchalance. Bill chuckled. "I'll take that as a maybe." By the third month, an unmistakable pattern had emerged. While both bobcats tolerated Brittany, accepting food, allowing necessary health checks, and occasionally seeking a brief moment of attention, they positively lit up when Bill appeared. Frank would race to the fence, emitting excited chirps that bore no resemblance to a domestic cat's meow, sounding every bit the wild animal he was. Cole, in his own way, would assume a posture of casual interest that fooled absolutely no one. "I don't understand it," Brittany confessed one evening, a mixture of amusement and genuine confusion in her voice. "I'm the one who feeds them every day. I'm the one who knows proper wildcat handling techniques. You barely knew what a bobcat was 3 months ago." Bill simply shrugged, seemingly as puzzled as she was. "Maybe that's exactly why. You're the responsible parent. I'm the fun one who doesn't know any better." But as the month stretched into a year, the preference only intensified. When they cautiously began supervised interactions inside the enclosure with Brittany, always present, and adhering strictly to safety protocols, the bobcat's favoritism became undeniably clear. Cole, who remained somewhat aloof with Brittany, would approach Bill with slow blinks and subtle body language that spoke volumes of growing trust. Frank was far less subtle, boldly rubbing against Bill's legs and soliciting enthusiastic scratches behind his tufted ears. "Traitors," Brittany muttered one evening after Frank had completely ignored her attempt to engage him with a brand new enrichment toy, only to pounce on it with unrestrained enthusiasm the moment Bill touched it. "They're not traitors," Bill replied, failing to conceal his pleased smile. "They just have specific taste in humans." Now, 3 years into their extraordinary family arrangement, the preferences had solidified into an established fact. Brittany, the professional wildlife biologist, the lifelong animal enthusiast, the daily caretaker, was firmly entrenched as the bobcat's second favorite human. A distant second at that. Standing in the yard, she watched as Bill entered the secure area of the enclosure. Instantly, Frank bounded towards him, circling his legs with happy chirps that echoed the wildness within him. "Hey there, Frankie," Bill crooned, crouching down to offer his knuckles for the bobcat to rub against. "Did you have a good day? Did you terrorize your brother like usual?" Cole, for approximately 30 seconds, maintained his air of dignified detachment, before abandoning his high perch to saunter over his tail, twitching with poorly concealed excitement. "And there's the distinguished gentleman," Bill said, extending his other hand towards Cole. The older bobcat sniffed it carefully before pressing his forehead against Bill's palm, a gesture of profound trust from the normally reserved animal. Brittany leaned against the fence, shaking her head in mock despair. "You know, most men bring home flowers for their wives. Mine brought home bobcats that love him more than they love me." Bill looked up, a wide grin spreading across his face. "They love you too. They're just—" Yeah, I know. I'm the mean mom who gives them medicine and trims their claws. You're the fun dad who sneaks them treats when I'm not looking." "I would never," Bill protested, the picture of innocence, despite the fact that they both knew he absolutely would and did. Frank chose that precise moment to perform his signature move, standing on his hind legs, to place his front paws on Bill's chest, bringing their faces inches apart. At a robust 40 pounds, the bobcat was not small, and the gesture invariably caused Brittany's heart rate to spike, despite knowing that Frank had never displayed a hint of aggression. "Careful," she cautioned automatically. "He's fine," Bill replied, maintaining eye contact with Frank. "Aren't you, buddy? You just want to say hello properly." The bobcat chuffed softly before dropping back to all fours, seemingly satisfied with the greeting. Cole, not to be outdone, pressed against Bill's side, and began a rumbling purr that seemed impossibly loud for an animal his size. "I'm going to finish dinner," Brittany announced, suppressing a smile. "Try not to get completely covered in bobcat hair before we eat." Inside the kitchen, she resumed her dinner preparations, and the sounds of Bill's laughter mingling with the bobcat's distinctive vocalizations drifting through the open window. The entire situation was objectively absurd. Her husband, who had grown up in a household where houseplants were considered high maintenance, now communing with two wild predators, who treated him like he was the best thing since sliced deer meat. Yet there was something undeniably heartwarming about it, too. Bill had stepped completely outside his comfort zone for her only to discover an unexpected connection that now seemed essential to his happiness. The sliding door opened, and Bill stepped inside, brushing a cascade of bobcat fur from his uniform. "Those two are extra energetic today," he commented, washing his hands at the sink. "Frank nearly knocked me over." "He's been pacing all afternoon," Brittany replied. "I think a storm's coming. They always get worked up before the barometric pressure drops." Bill dried his hands and came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What's for dinner, and can I help?" "Roast chicken with vegetables, and you can set the table." As they moved around the kitchen in comfortable domesticity, Brittany's thoughts drifted to the incredible journey they had embarked on together. Marriage was always about adaptation and surprise, but their particular path had included some truly unexpected turns. "Do you remember that first week after we brought them home?" she asked as they sat down to eat. "When you said you'd be happy if they eventually just tolerated your presence." Bill laughed, reaching for the salt. "And now, I can't even use the bathroom without Frank trying to follow me in. Just last week I found him sitting outside the shower, waiting for you." "Not me. You." "He's loyal," Bill said with mock solemnity. "A quality to be admired. And what am I, chopped liver? I'm the one who feeds them their actual chopped liver." "Maybe that's the problem," Bill teased. "They know where their food comes from. They think you're the mighty hunter who kills their prey. They respect you too much to cuddle." Brittany snorted. "Nice try. I think it's your beard. Seriously, Frank is obsessed with it. I've seen him trying to groom it." "It could be." Bill's expression softened. "Or maybe they sensed that I needed them more than you did." "What do you mean?" Bill set down his fork, considering his words carefully. "You've always been comfortable with animals. You understand them intuitively. But for me, connecting with Frank and Cole has been a revelation. I never knew I could feel this kind of bond with creatures that don't even belong in our world." "Really?" Brittany said firmly. "They belong exactly where they are. With us." After dinner, they settled on the couch to watch a movie, a routine that had evolved to include one extra step since the arrival of the Bobcats. Bill positioned himself directly in front of the large window that looked out onto the enclosure's indoor section, knowing that within minutes, both Bobcats would arrive to watch him watch television. Sure enough, Frank appeared, first pressing his face against the glass with such intensity that his whiskers splayed outward. Cole followed more sedately, sitting beside his brother, with his tail wrapped neatly around his paws. "Our audience has arrived," Bill commented, waving at the Bobcats. "Always punctual," Brittany replied, curling against his side. "At least they can't physically squeeze between us anymore. Don't remind me. I still have scars from when Frank decided my lap was the only acceptable place to sleep." They both laughed, remembering the early days when they were still figuring out appropriate boundaries. there had been some painful lessons learned. Bobcats even raised with humans were not domestic cats. Their play could turn rough, their independent nature could manifest as aggression, and their natural behaviors could wreak havoc on household items. "Remember when Cole shredded your favorite chair?" Brittany asked, as if reading his thoughts. "How could I forget?" Bill groaned. "It was my fault for thinking he could be unsupervised inside." "And when Frank opened every single kitchen cabinet except the one with his food?" "That was actually impressive. I'm still not sure how he figured out the child locks." They reminisced about the learning curve, which had been steeper than either had anticipated. There had been property damage, minor injuries, mostly scratches and nips during overly enthusiastic play, and one memorable escape attempt that had ended with Bill in a tree coaxing Frank down with pieces of chicken, while Brittany tried desperately to avoid a full-blown panic attack below. Yet through it all, their bond had only strengthened. The Bobcats had adapted to their routines, just as Bill and Brittany had adapted to the Bobcats' needs. Regular visits from their wildlife veterinarian confirmed that both animals were healthy and, as far as anyone could tell, content in their unusual living situation. Outside the window, Frank had lost interest in their movie and was now engaged in his evening ritual of grooming Cole, who tolerated the attention with typical stoicism. The younger Bobcat meticulously licked his brother's ears, a behavior that both established his dominance and reinforced their familial bond. "They're good for each other," Brittany observed softly. "I can't imagine how lonely it would be for just one of them." "Like us," Bill replied, squeezing her hand. "Better together." The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, confirming Brittany's prediction about the approaching weather system. She rose early, as was her habit, to prepare the Bobcats' breakfast while Bill showered. The complex diet she maintained for them included raw meat, carefully measured vitamin supplements, and occasional whole prey items. A far cry from the simple kibble of domestic cats. As she meticulously measured out portions, she heard the familiar sound of Frank's impatient pacing in the indoor enclosure. I know. Breakfast is coming," she called out. When she entered the feeding area, both Bobcats were waiting. Frank paced with his characteristic restless energy, while Cole sat with an air of regal dignity near the door. They accepted their food from her with an enthusiasm that briefly overcame their usual preference for Bill. "See, you do love me when I have meat," she told them, watching as they ate with focused carnivore intensity. After they finished, she spent time cleaning the enclosure, while the Bobcats lounged nearby, occasionally showing mild interest in her activities, but mostly just observing with their inscrutable feline gazes. This was their routine. Comfortable, established, and entirely different from the life she had envisioned when she first fell in love with a city boy who knew nothing about wildlife. Bill appeared at the connecting door, dressed for work in his ranger uniform. Immediately, both Bobcats perked up, Frank letting out an excited chirp and bounding over. "I swear," Brittany muttered, a hint of playful jealousy in her voice. "It's like they can smell you coming." "Probably can," Bill replied cheerfully, entering the secure area. "Morning, boys." He crouched down, and Frank immediately pressed his head against Bill's chin, a behavior that still made Brittany's professional side marvel. In the wild, Bobcats were solitary territorial creatures. This level of affection, especially toward a male human, defied conventional wildlife behavior patterns. "Got a long shift today," Bill told the Bobcats, as if they understood every word. "But I'll bring you something nice when I get back." "Don't you dare bring home another dead thing," Brittany warned, though she couldn't help smiling. Last month, Bill had arrived with a roadkill deer he'd found. Legally obtained with proper permissions, of course, but still an unexpected addition to their freezer. No promises. He grinned, giving Frank a final scratch behind the ears before standing. Cole, keep your brother out of trouble. The older Bobcat blinked slowly, a gesture that Brittany had come to interpret as feline acknowledgement. After Bill left for work, Brittany faced her own workday. A combination of remote consulting for wildlife management agencies and local conservation projects that allowed her the flexibility of working from home most days. She settled at her desk near the large window overlooking the Bobcat enclosure, where she could keep a watchful eye on them while tackling her emails and reports. By mid-morning, the drizzle had intensified into a steady rain, driving the Bobcats into their sheltered areas. Frank paced restlessly in the indoor enclosure, clearly missing his usual outdoor outlets for energy. "I know, buddy," Brittany said, glancing up from her laptop. "Rainy days are boring." Frank paused in his pacing to look at her, then pointedly turned to stare at the door where Bill usually entered. The unspoken message couldn't have been clearer. Where is the fun human? "He's at work," she explained as if the Bobcat might actually understand. "And I'm right here, you know. I'm not chopped liver." Frank responded with a dramatic yawn, complete with an impressive display of teeth, and resumed his restless pacing. Cole, more adaptable to quiet days, had settled on a high shelf, meticulously grooming his luxurious fur. Occasionally, he would pause to watch Brittany, his golden eyes unreadable. "At least you're not actively rejecting me," she told him. Cole blinked slowly before returning to his grooming, which Brittany chose to interpret as a form of grudging agreement. The day passed slowly, the rain continuing its relentless drumming against the windows. By late afternoon, both Bobcats were exhibiting signs of restlessness that concerned Brittany. Bored predators could quickly become destructive predators. Time for some enrichment, she decided, setting aside her work. She gathered several items she had prepared for just such occasions, scent-infused toys designed to pique their wild instincts, puzzle feeders that challenged their problem-solving skills, and a new element. A recording of Bill's voice she had captured weeks ago for precisely this purpose. It was slightly manipulative, perhaps, but she hoped it would be effective. When she played the recording of Bill talking soothingly to the Bobcats, both animals immediately perked up their heads, swiveling as they searched for their favorite human. Frank chirped questioningly, while Cole tilted his head in obvious confusion. "Sorry, guys. It's just a recording," Brittany admitted as she distributed the toys and puzzle feeders. "The real thing will be home in a few hours." The enrichment activities kept them occupied for a while. But as the afternoon wore on, Brittany noticed Frank becoming increasingly agitated. He paced along the fence line with a frantic energy and vocalized in a way that seemed unusual even for his generally more expressive nature. "What's wrong, buddy?" she asked, her concern growing. "Is the storm making you nervous?" Frank ignored her, his attention fixed on something in the distance. Cole, too, had abandoned his typical calm demeanor and stood alert on his platform, his ears swiveling intently towards the driveway. A prickle of unease ran down Brittany's spine. The Bobcat's senses were far sharper than human perception. If something had caught their attention, it warranted investigation. She grabbed a raincoat and stepped outside, scanning the property. The rain had slackened to a drizzle again, limiting visibility across their expansive land. Nothing seemed amiss. No unusual vehicles, no wildlife venturing too close to the house. Then she heard it. The distant, distinctive sound of a vehicle engine straining, laboring. It sounded like Bill's truck, but definitely not running smoothly. The Bobcats had heard it long before she could, their earlier agitation now making perfect sense. She jogged down the driveway, rounding a bend to see Bill's Forest Service truck, moving slowly towards the house, a plume of white steam rising ominously from under the hood, despite the persistent rain. "Bill?" she called out, hurrying to meet him. The truck rolled to a stop and Bill emerged, looking harried but unharmed. "Hey," radiator hose blew about a mile back. "Limped it home rather than wait for a tow in this weather." "Are you okay? You're late." I was starting to worry. "I'm fine. Phone died, or I would have called." He gestured towards the sputtering truck. "This old beast, on the other hand, needs some serious attention." They made their way back to the house together, Bill recounting the mechanical woes of his aging truck, while Brittany updated him on her uneventful day. As they approached the Bobcat enclosure, the cat's behavior underwent a dramatic shift, transforming from anxious pacing to unrestrained excitement. Frank let out a series of loud, joyful chirps, racing back and forth along the fence line. Even Cole abandoned his usual dignified composure, moving quickly to the gate, his tail lashing expressively. "Someone's happy to see you," Brittany commented, unable to keep the wry amusement from her voice. Bill smiled, visibly cheered, despite his difficult day. "At least someone appreciates me around here." "Hey, I appreciate you too," she protested, nudging him playfully with her elbow. "I know." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "But you don't purr when I walk through the door." "I could try, but it might be weird." They laughed together, heading inside out of the dampness. Even as Bill went to change out of his wet uniform, the Bobcats tracked his movement through the windows, refusing to settle until he reappeared and came to spend time with them. Later, as evening settled over their Montana home, Brittany watched from the kitchen window as Bill sat in the covered portion of the enclosure. Frank was sprawled across his lap, his golden eyes half closed in apparent bliss as Bill gently stroked his spotted coat. Cole maintained a slightly more formal distance, sitting nearby, but occasionally leaning in to receive a reassuring touch. The scene painted a picture so far removed from what she had ever expected their life to be, yet somehow perfect in its unexpectedness. When Bill joined her inside for dinner, his clothes dusted with Bobcat fur and his beard slightly damp where Frank had attempted a grooming session, she couldn't help but smile. "What?" he asked, noticing her expression. "Nothing. Just thinking about how things work out in unexpected ways." Bill glanced toward the window, where both Bobcats now sat watching them with an almost palpable reluctance to let him out of their sight. "You mean how I went from city boy to Bobcat whisperer?" "Something like that." She passed him a plate. "When you brought them home, I never imagined they'd become so attached to you specifically. Feeling like a third wheel in your own field of expertise." He teased gently. "A little," she admitted. "But mainly I'm just grateful. For what? For you. For being willing to take such a huge step outside your comfort zone for me. And then for embracing it so completely." She reached across the table to take his hand. "Even if it means I'm perpetually third in line for attention around here." Bill squeezed her hand, his expression softening. "You know what's funny? 3 years ago, I went to that sanctuary thinking I was doing something entirely for you. I never expected to find something I didn't even know I was missing." Outside, Frank scratched impatiently at the window, clearly missing Bill's presence. Cole sat beside him, maintaining his dignified posture, but equally intent. "I think your fan club is getting restless," Brittany said, nodding towards the window. Bill looked over his shoulder and smiled. "They can wait 5 minutes. Right now, my attention belongs to my first favorite mammal." "Smooth talker," Brittany chuckled. "No wonder they love you." As they finished dinner, making plans to assess the truck's radiator in the morning, and discussing a potential renovation to further enhance the Bobcat's enclosure, Brittany reflected on the strange, wonderful path they had navigated. A city boy who had never desired pets had become the beloved human of two wild predators. A wildlife biologist who had dedicated her life to studying animals from a professional distance had learned to share her home and her heart with the species she most admired. And together, they had created a family unlike any other, unconventional, occasionally chaotic, but overflowing with unexpected joy. When Bill returned to the enclosure after dinner, Brittany followed, watching as both bobcats immediately gravitated towards him. Frank, as always, claimed prime real estate in Bill's lap, his eyes drifting shut in contentment as Bill stroked his patterned fur. Cole, ever the gentleman, pressed against Bill's side, a low, rumbling purr, audible even from a distance. "Room for one more?" she asked, approaching cautiously. To her surprise, Frank chittered at her without any hint of hostility, shifting slightly as if making space. Cole blinked slowly, a gesture she had come to recognize as feline acceptance. As she settled beside her husband, and the bobcats rearranged themselves to accommodate her presence, not pushing her away, but inviting her into their unique circle. "Well, look at that," Bill said softly. "Turns out you're not the third wheel after all. More like the fourth in a very strange quad." "Indeed," she replied, leaning against his shoulder. Frank stretched out dramatically, managing to extend across both their laps, in a gesture that seemed deliberately inclusive. Cole, ever the considerate companion, shifted to press against Brittany's side, his rumbling purr a steady vibration against her leg. Outside, the rain had finally ceased leaving, behind a fresh, clean scent and a clearing sky, where the first stars were beginning to twinkle. Inside their unusual family circle, an equilibrium had been reached. Not what any of them had initially expected, perhaps, but exactly what they all needed. "You know," Bill said quietly, stroking Frank's soft fur, "I may have brought them home for you, but I think they've given us both something we didn't even know we were looking for." Brittany nodded, feeling Cole's steady heartbeat against her side. "A family. An unconventional one, but ours." As if understanding their quiet sentiment, Frank lifted his head to look at them both, his golden eyes gleaming in the twilight, no longer choosing between them, but accepting them together. The final piece of a puzzle none of them had realized needed solving. A valuable lesson? This heartwarming story reminds us that family can manifest in the most unexpected ways, and that love transcends conventional boundaries. Sometimes, the greatest joys and deepest connections arise from stepping outside our comfort zones and embracing the unconventional. Just as Bill, who never envisioned himself as a pet owner, found an extraordinary bond with two wild bobcats, we too may discover profound fulfillment in the most surprising of relationships and circumstances. Open your heart to the unexpected, for life's most precious gifts often come disguised in the unfamiliar. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share your comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more captivating tales. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story?